Hello, everybody. It's that time again. It is the cool down room with Bowser and David. And we are here today to talk about Monaco, the most boring race on the planet. I mean, stuff did happen for once, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's still probably one of the worst Monaco Grand Prix I've ever watched. But yeah, we're just going to dive straight into it. We're not even going to go through the whole lineup because majority of people did not even move position. I saw a joke going around from it was a joke thing of Guinness World Record of the quickest parade because no one actually really overtook anyone. So this will be really quite quick. So we'll go for first lap, and we'll go for just after the first corner, a little bit of a straight going down there, and the three-car pile-up that will have been Gene Hass's worst nightmare. Uh, Bowser, talk us through it from your point of view and what you think happened and who's at fault.
Okay, well, so initially what happened is you've got Checo Perez down the back of the grid in I think as he left turn one, he was around about 17th. So he's on the back foot and he's got a bad exit out the corner, hopping over the curbs and all that. He has then got Magnussen and Hulkenberg, like you were saying, the two Hasses, directly behind him with better exits out the corner. Now, in a lot of tracks, that's not too much of a problem. I mean, it's bad for Perez, but great for the Hasses. Except we are in Monaco, and Monaco, there isn't really a straight anywhere because even what we refer to as a straight is about as windy as a garden path on a Sunday. So you've got you're going up the hill towards Casino Square, and it is it's almost a straight line as the drivers would do it single file. They can sort of hit the apexes either side and kind of pretty much snake their way through, but with minimal steering angle. Wherever, if you are too wide, side by side with another car, there is violent changes of direction up that hill. And then add a third car into the mix, and it's just absolutely never going to happen. Guys, to sort of who's at fault and what happened. So, Perez was relatively middle of the road, obviously trying to defend from both Hasses that you can see in his mirror. Magnussen was slightly more advanced and going up the outside of technically one of the first little kinks. So he's on the right-hand side coming past him, and he does actually get his front tyres alongside Checo's rear tyres. And that's part of the issue we have here, where Hulkenberg was a little bit further back. And I feel like it was a bit more of a collateral damage in the incident. The incident, in my view, was definitely between Perez and Magnussen there. So Perez continually, don't get me wrong, he would have seen in his mirrors, which is very difficult to judge the depth perception in that because the mirrors are so tiny. But he would have potentially have seen. I hope he was moving right because he saw Hulkenberg also coming up the left-hand side of him. Hulkenberg didn't actually get up to alongside, but obviously, like I said, it would have been difficult to have told. But Magnussen had got there and would have been in the right mirror. Perez just continued to move right and push. And, Magnussen was scraping on the wall way before he touched Perez. Magnussen had done everything he could to, yes, keep his foot in where he could have backed out. But essentially, your first lap, this is one of the best and only opportunities in this race to make a pass.
Shown by the rest of the race, really. But yeah.
Yes, exactly. So then you're looking at, Perez kept moving over to the point where he pinned Magnussen against the wall. Granted, Magnussen's front tyres, Checo's rear tyres, so you could argue that Perez had the right to move once, or it's difficult with the kinks to kind of work that side of it out. But Perez was entitled to move to an extent, but it was technically in a track without the walls, would have been crowding off the track maybe. And then because Magnussen, being Magnussen, did not get out the throttle, that turned the back Perez round, and essentially at that point, Magnussen was T-boning him into the wall as the next kink came round, and then that's shot across the track with all the debris. Now, unfortunately for Hulkenberg in that situation, like I said, he was not actually up alongside on the left-hand side, and saw this all happening to the right of him, and he had a decision to make at that point. He either slammed on the brakes and let it happen in front of him, or, which he did do, is that he saw that there was still the gap to the left-hand side, didn't want to get caught up and decided to just floor it and hope that he could make it through that very ever-closing gap on the left-hand side. I totally get why he did it. It's a split decision. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. But unfortunately, just got clipped on the rear right as he was going through that little gap by Perez coming back across the track. So unfortunately, that took him into the wall and out and spun him and destroyed his rear suspension as well. So not crazy amount of damage on either Haas, but obviously enough to take him out of the race. But not severe damage that to what the Williams have been struggling with all year, with their chassis needing to go and get repaired and stuff. I don't think it's quite to that extent. But that Red Bull, I'm not joking, was a mess.
Right off.
Oh, horrific. And Perez is now shot to the top of the table by quite some margin of the amount of crash damage from this year and the cost to repairs. So he's up at over £2.5 million worth of damage this season.
They're going to have to cut back on their caviar, aren't they?
Absolutely, it's going to be Mackey's on the way home for them for the rest of the season, I think. Other fast food chains are available, so in my opinion, it is very difficult because, like I said, it's not a straight and it's very tight, and you can understand why that was quite seen as one of the only opportunities to pass. Totally do get that, but in my opinion, the blame. I don't think Hulkenberg's anywhere to blame, so take him out of that scenario.
No, I actually think he did everything he could possibly do. I think if he took an option A of what you said and slammed on the brakes, I think he just ends up more in the middle of that because he's still got to decelerate, and I think
absolutely, totally. And
he did the best choice, but
and he had Joe behind him who probably would have just ploughed into the back of him if he slammed on the brakes also.
No, Joe backed off way early.
But either way, you're left with Perez and Magnussen now. In my opinion, I'm going to give this 60-40 as fault, as in Perez being the 60. I personally feel like, he kept on pushing, despite the fact, not saying it's an easy situation whatsoever, but he went and crowded out the guy that was, actually had some of his car alongside him and pinned him into the wall, which obviously then turned himself round, rather than staying central in the track and just going off and taking the kink to the left, which were constantly in his mirrors, seeing where they were. He was under pressure, and I feel like 60-40. The reason why I'm giving 40% of Magnussen the blame is because there is that gap was closing. He'd already really squeezed him up against the wall, and he could see Perez was still coming over. So at that point, he should have got out the throttle and tried to, avoid that scenario at that point. Although very aggressive by Perez, but due to that fact, I'm giving it 60-40. Perez's fault, in my opinion.
Fair. Well, I'm going to surprise you probably and say I have looked at this a few times now, back after the race, and I actually agree with the race stewards. I think it's a racing incident. Slap one. Yes, Perez, it does seem to be like crowding into Magnussen a bit, but I don't think the move was ever on. If you actually look at the way the track goes, the barrier it's like this, but then it kind of bulges out. So even if he gives Kevin Magnussen the space, he's going to have to back out eventually anyway, in my opinion, because otherwise he's going into the barrier no matter what. I think it's a racing incident. I think that either way, it would have ended up with both of them kind of, a little bit of fault, like you said, but I don't think you can say it's 60% Perez's fault because I think the move's never really on and K-Mag shouldn't have been there in the first place. So, I think it's a racing incident was the correct answer, in my opinion.
Fair enough.
But yeah. Okay, right, let's move on to 17th place, and Alpine. What is going on at Alpine? Silly mistake, not mistake, but silly move from Esteban Ocon, with yellow flags and everything already out to try and throwing up the inside of his teammate going into the tunnel section. They're coming across in front of him, damaging his car and taking himself out of the race. By the sounds of it, potentially losing himself his seat for Canada now. So, interesting times ahead there. I mean, I know you kind of disagree with me on this one. You think Ocon was fair play to do that move. I think it wasn't right. And I think Gasly was right to be angry with him, to be honest with you, because, you don't try and overtake there. They tried it in smaller cars back in the day with Jenson Button on Pascal Wehrlein that ended up with someone in the wall. So you know it's not on there. So I don't even know why Ocon attempted it personally, but yeah, I know you have a different opinion. So go on, give it.
If you actually, when I looked at the video, don't get me wrong, it was a ballsy move, and you've got to be 100% committed to try and make that. And even at that state, it's very, very risky. I'm not going to, take that away from Gasly or anything like why Alpine seemed to be so upset by the situation. Totally get it. And, yeah, he shouldn't have, from a team's point of view, whether it came off or not, he shouldn't have really made that dive on his teammate. It's too risky, and puts both cars at jeopardy. And they've had I've had a couple of zero point scores from collisions between the two of them already. So that surely must have already been discussed. So I'm not going to take away from the fact that there's probably a team order of some sort not to engage in that kind of move, especially one as risky as that. So I'd like to start by saying, from that point of view, he shouldn't have taken the dive, unless he was told you're free to race, whatever needs to be done, kind of thing. However, when I watched the video back, and watched it live, it was a move that got him all the way past Gasly, bar his rear tyres. Just like he moved across in the exit, which granted was part down to how quickly he took the corner over Gasly.
Clearly didn't have enough room there, did he, to make the move? That's the point.
Yeah, but he dived all the way and got his car from all the way behind Gasly to all the way in front, bar his rear, very, very back of his rear tyres against Gasly's fronts. That is a significant change in position to the point where, yes, Gasly would have had to slam on his brakes to get out of it, or steer wider to get out of it, which is why I'm saying super aggressive move that you shouldn't have done your teammate no matter what. But if you take away the fact they're teammates, and if Gasly got out of it and sort of driven slightly I know obviously there's a wall on the outside or the barrier on the outside, but essentially not turned into the corner because he's seeing Ocon go through, which some people would have done, I feel. Then Ocon had got through. No, as in as he was further back in the corner, rather than still turning into the corner, stopped more this point before he then took the corner and waited for Ocon to clear him.
That someone's trying to overtake you, you should just back out of it. That's basically what you're saying.
I mean, when there's walls on the outside, when there's walls on either side, and someone makes such a big dive and lunge like that, that's gonna end up in some sort of collision and that sort of stuff, then yeah. If someone's managed to catch you off guard and dive that far and get from all the way behind you to all the way in front, probably 30 centimeter kind of gap, then in my opinion, that's made enough of a pass for them to be okay, I'm gonna back out, let you go. And if that wasn't teammates and there wasn't that bit of contact and Gasly had turned out of it or not turned into the corner as much as he did and let him go, we'd all be saying here, wow, what a fantastic move done at that corner. We never thought that was on, So,
yeah, but the fact of the matter is,
it
didn't work out because it wasn't on. And I feel like you're giving Ocon way too much credit for what was a stupid move, really, on the inside of on the exit of the inside of the hairpin section. It was I can't ever remember seeing that move come off, and especially with the larger cars they have nowadays, I think it was a stupid move. I don't see any part of this that's Gasly's fault, in my opinion. Gasly is
I'm not saying it's Gasly's fault.
Stuck to his line. He's gone to go and accelerate. He's probably seen someone trying to overtake him. He's put his foot down. He's entitled to do that. And the car overtaking you needs to, not hit you and take you out, which Ocon didn't manage. So.
I don't know. I feel like Ocon was far enough by that point that Gasly should have got out of it personally. Yeah, especially bear in mind their teammates.
He's not behind him at that point fully, though, is he? You're equally saying by his back wheel hitting his front wheel that he's alongside him. If that was the other way around, if Ocon was behind him trying to overtake him, it would have been fair play, like Magnussen in the wall. You're saying Magnussen in the wall. Magnussen was entitled to be there. Gasly's entitled to be there. Right.
Yeah, he is entitled to be there. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I disagree. Anyway,
But he could have
let us
avoided it.
know in the
That's my
chat
point.
what you think. Who you
Yeah, yeah.
think was at fault? If you think it was Gasly or Ocon. I've just seen in the chat actually watched a video the other day how every team Ocon is in. He has fought with his teammate. At what point do they realise Ocon is chaotic energy? Well, funny you should mention because solely of him constantly doing things like this. So yeah, he's probably shot himself in the foot there, and he might even be out of the race seat in Canada with. There's two rumours going around, one that Jack Doohan's getting it and one that Mick Schumacher's getting it. So either way, it sounds like Ocon is right. Okay, moving on from the crashes. With surprising for Monaco to only have that many crashes. Let's put that into perspective. It's actually quite impressive that we only had 4 crashes for an entire Monaco Grand Prix. Keep in mind that one year only 3 cars finished this race. So next up, we had Joe, then Sargent, then Lance Stroll, who once again has had a bad weekend. Actually out-qualified Fernando Alonso, and I was speaking very highly of him in the quali, thinking that he's managing to beat Alonso. Alonso worked so hard to get him a free pit stop for him to then throw his fucking tyre in the wall and give himself a puncture. It's pretty poor. I mean, at that stage, all he had to do was get to the end of the bloody race, and he couldn't even manage that. And yeah, it's embarrassing at this point. Especially Fernando working so hard to get that gap for him, and he's thrown it away within, I think it was about 2 laps of his pit stop. It was really quick after his pit stop that he just threw it in a wall and got a puncture. Fernando must have been fuming as he went past him. What's your thoughts on it? Do you think differently? Do you think Lance had a good weekend?
I mean, it was good up until that point. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think it's that hard to keep someone, even as Alonso's talents, behind you in a race at Monaco. Bear in mind it's so difficult to overtake. But up until that point, he'd done everything that everyone could have expected of him. He'd beaten Alonso, and more by beating Alonso in quali, which is the most important day here in Monaco. So yeah, up until that point, it was going great, and then as we've seen so many times, he's run out of luck, whether he's pushing too hard or just lapse of concentration,
Is
whatever
luck
it is.
the right word, or is it talent?
Yeah, well, that's debatable. But yeah, the thing is, he's got podiums before in weaker
Pole
cars.
positions,
I know.
he can do it when he
Can
gets
do
his
it.
mind
He
to
can be lightning quick. It's so frustrating to watch him because there's actual talent in there. I honestly, I promise you, I don't doubt that he's a very quick, talented driver. He won championship series that had George Russell and Lando Norris in them, and he beat them fair and square in like for like cars. So, he's got the talent there. He just doesn't seem to be able to hook it up for the entire weekend, whether it's a poor quali and having to push harder and make it up in the race, or whether he's having a good race and then bins it.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating, and it must be more frustrating if you're an Aston Martin team member of any capacity. But yeah, I don't know. At this point, it's just Alonso. They've done all the work. Well, yeah, they'd done all the hard work. He'd managed to get ahead of everyone else. They were going 2 seconds a lap slower than some of the cars in front.
Yeah.
Just for him to build that gap. It's crazy, man. Bear in mind that pack were being held up by Tsunoda, who was going nearly a second slower than the leaders already.
Yeah,
So they were going.
I think it was something like 4 seconds a lap slower by the time you got down to that point, kind of thing. It was something crazy like that.
Absolutely ridiculous.
And to throw it away just like that,
Yeah.
And
that shows you the inherent issue with Monaco as a track on the grid, or on the calendar. That's inherently the issue. So yeah. That's something else we'll cover too.
Sorted out of Monaco, definitely. Chat coming back to us saying he had a good weekend in regards to not crashing into anyone.
Except for the barrier.
Yeah, the barrier. But to be fair, it's accurate. He didn't crash into someone. He crashed into something. Then next up we got Valtteri Bottas, who I'm gonna only overtaker the race I saw was by Valtteri Bottas. So applauding him there for that. not a great weekend for Kick Sauber, but I bet you when they finished qualifying, if you told them they'd be 13th, they'd have bit your hand off for it. So pretty good result in the end for Bottas there. And if you believe the rumours, he's off to Williams soon. Well, it's either him or signed, is what I'm hearing. So we shall see. Then we got Danny Rick, who I think will be disappointed. I think he actually started in 11th in the end because of penalty or something like that. I feel like it was Hulkenberg had to start from the pits, wasn't it? Or was supposed to start from the pits, didn't in the end. But Haas wished it had started from the pits. But yeah, so be disappointed to have lost out a place to Fernando Alonso. I think that happened off the line actually. So that was basically that done for him for the 11th, creating the world's longest, slowest train. Then we move into the top 10. Pierre Gasly, a point for Alpine. Pretty impressive, to get a whack like that and the car to stay in one piece that works for the entire race. So actually, fair play to Alpine on that. Maybe the fact that the car's heavier, it was a bit more robust and could take it. Moving up again further, we got Albon and the Williams, getting good points for them, P9, so that gets them off the mark for the year. Actually puts them ahead of Alpine in the standings because they've got the higher finishing position, so great job for Albon, and hopefully a sign of things turning around for Williams now. Do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, well, just quickly on Albon, that even more impressive. Bear in mind, you normally associate Williams with their straight line speed. So for a track that essentially straight line speed is very, very irrelevant almost, bearing on how fine the actual margins are, for him to get a downforce deficient Williams up into the points is just a ridiculous result. So amazing from Albon. Like I said, he has had a couple of things this year that have, he's a very great driver. He's a great driver, and he's made a couple of mistakes this year. Maybe partly down to the fact he's had to push the car so hard, but this is a fantastic result. So yeah, amazing. Yeah, great from him. Moving forward, you've got Tsunoda, who had I think that was a fantastic weekend for Tsunoda. Really showed that he can sort of be there. He's beaten Danny Rick again. We've said it multiple times before. He's actually really coming into his own now. I think he's really shown, and the fact that again you still don't hear him being referred to as a potential for that Red Bull seat, or like a kind of sensible consideration for that second Red Bull seat, is just bananas. I don't get it at all. Just kind of quickly flip back. I didn't give Bottas a round of applause for the only overtake because it was on Sargent. So just popping that out there. Moving forward. We've got 7th place was Lewis Hamilton. I'm gonna address the Mercedes issue as a whole, right? So Hamilton was there, and spoiler alert, the 6th place was Verstappen. He wasn't first, obviously. Right, yeah. And then you've got Russell in 5th, right? So Russell, during the pit stop that they made, Russell was. Hamilton made the first stop, and then they knew that Red Bull was going to cover them off, and Russell was directly in front of Verstappen, very, very close. That was, bear in mind it's so hard to overtake, Russell should have just absolutely, especially in the Casino Square area, should have absolutely just parked the car, borderline standstill, and crawled round like Alonso had done, and cost 4 odd seconds a lap. And slow Verstappen down, so that Hamilton could pit, and then would obviously then be in front of both of Russell and Verstappen. I know it's not exactly a kosher kind of. It doesn't sit well with me as a whole, but from a team's point of view, I was watching that race live with the good man with me here, and it just seemed like an absolute no-brainer to get both cars ahead of Verstappen. And I just cannot, for the life of me, understand why.
I disagree with you here. I don't think George is at fault at all. This is actually
I
entirely on
don't think
Lewis.
it's.
This is entirely on Lewis. He came on the radio after he came out in his outlap saying, "Why didn't you tell me outlap was critical?" I'm sorry, but when you're undercutting someone and you're at Monaco, every outlap is critical. I don't know why you would need to be told that, but I've no doubt in my mind that if you're gunning it round, then Lewis probably would have got back past Max, but he didn't get it round, and he got caught by it. So I don't think you can say the fault lies with George fully here.
I don't think the fault lies with
I
George
think
at all. I think it was the team that should have made the call to George to do that, and at the same time, the team should have been telling Lewis that it was critical. Although, like I said, I was going to bring in absolutely there is, especially a seven-time world champion should know without needing to be told that it is a absolutely critical. Yes, okay, I know everyone wants like to make the tires go to the end, and you want to ease them in and not use them all up. But my God, just use a bit of them just to make sure you are clear of those two. And like I said, then they could have, if they were, if Russell was complaining about the fact that they'd screwed him over with strategy, could just manufactured the swap back. Honestly, like that is on Lewis but my primarily Mercedes as a whole, and that's coming from a Mercedes fan. I'm Mercedes through and through. First of all, more than any single driver on their own. I'm a Mercedes fan, and they screwed up. Absolute. That is the only opportunity that they're going to have the entire season to manufacture a move that would get them past Verstappen, and essentially he'd have no way of being able to stop them.
I mean,
There's no way.
I do get you on that point. I do feel like this whole thing though with outlap. You didn't tell me outlap was critical, but backs up my continuing thoughts that Lewis does not really care about Mercedes anymore, and that he's just thinking of next season, because there's no way you go back to a few years ago, Lewis, that he'd have to be told outlap critical around Monaco. Like, so I
He's
think
lost a little bit of his edge.
I don't think
He's
lost
lost
his edge. I
his.
just think he doesn't care.
Well,
I
yeah,
honestly think
but
that's
in
what it is.
doing that, he's lost his competitive edge. That's what I mean. I don't think he's lost any driving talent. I
He's
feel
just not
like, or
trying.
that he's, yeah,
He's supposed to.
it's not for a win, so you don't really care. But the thing,
Mercedes a chance to pass Ferrari, which means they have less money for next year. So why would he do it? Like, I honestly feel like Lewis just gone, nah, I don't really care anymore.
I, I don't think it's quite at that point. If just, I'm just disappointed. That I really thought, that I know obviously the start of the season he would have been hoping that he could have challenged for the title. He's clearly switched off an competitive edge. The fact that now he knows he's not fighting for a championship in this season, and it's just a case of, well, just get through to the end of this, and hopefully the Ferrari will be at least on par with the Red Bull next year. It seems to be his kind of ethos, which is just such a shame. Because, like I said, this kind of thing, like I said, just such a great opportunity to absolutely snooker. The second Verstappen didn't pit, and Lewis did, I actually sat back and I was like, amazing, they've got him. There's no way. I'd like to know what the call I want to kind of hear, because like I said, you shouldn't have had to have been told that it was critical. It obviously was critical. So Lewis has dropped a massive ball there, but I still think that they could have, Mercedes as a whole, as a team, an 8-time world championship team, could have turned around and said to George, back him the fuck up and just make it absolutely banker that Lewis gets past.
You're right. They could have said that.
I can't believe
that. Especially with Red Bull not having Perez there to try and help in any way, shape, or form, as they must be becoming accustomed to in this season. But yes, anyway, so moving on from the Mercedes and the Max Verstappen of it all, we've got our top four, which signs Oscar Piastri, and he finally did it. Charles Leclerc won his home Grand Prix. Is it the 5th time of asking? I feel like he's had like Formula 2 and then 3 cracks of it in Formula 1.
Well, sixth time of asking. I think he's done 5 previous.
Yeah, he's finally managed to do it. I think I've heard something like 83 years since someone from Monaco had won.
93.
93.
93.
Absolutely amazing. Could not be happier for him, and he deserved to. Wish it had been a more competitive race, and people weren't, I think some of the pace was almost like the same level as the Formula 2 cars. That's how slow we were going around the Monaco circuit. So, yeah, pretty poor in that regards, but really happy for him to finally get his home Grand Prix win. maybe we'll see a different Charles off the back of this. Maybe it's going to revitalise him, and we'll have a competitive second half of the season. Who knows? But also Oscar Piastri, I think that's his first full race around Monaco, isn't it? Did they race there last? Did they
Yeah, the
race
race
last year,
last
didn't
year.
they?
Yeah, he would
So
have
it's
had
the
last year.
second race around Monaco to be second place, ahead
His
of
first
Lando
competitive one.
Norris, who everyone is like lauding at the moment.
Hmm.
You know, fantastic job, and couldn't deserve it more. I'm very excited for the future of Oscar Piastri in our sport.
Yeah, like I said, this is the first time Oscar's really had a competitive car around this track. Because if you remember last season, this was before the B spec, so this was still the awful McLaren kind of era of last season. So he didn't really have much of an opportunity. So to finish second, just an amazing job for Oscar. And Lando still bringing constant points in fourth is. I
Oh
think
yeah,
he'll be a bit
absolutely.
disappointed on the Saturday. He would have hoped for a bit more. I feel like he thought he had a bit more in there, so I think he was a bit disappointed with that. And obviously knowing that would make Sunday that much harder. But that's the advantage of having two really top drivers in a car that's performing well. As we've seen from what Red Bull are lacking with Perez at the moment, you've got two drivers. When one of them has a slightly off one and start field over the winter, they had the pick of the drivers and they didn't make a change when they should have. I think that's the crux of it, and this is the best example. Monaco is such a crunch race. That it's I'm absolutely gobsmacked by it. I'd like to bring us back quickly though,
Yeah, go.
back to the very first lap of the grid, of the not the cause of the red flag, but what happened slightly after the red flag. So in turn one, Sainz had a run on Oscar, of which Oscar defended around the outside and managed to keep the place. Sainz actually got a puncture off of running over the side sort of floor elements of the McLaren. So he had a left front puncture, which took him off into sort of an extra bit of the track that no one uses in Casino Square, and in theory, put him to the back of the grid. Now, under the red flag, he was allowed the count back meant that he was allowed to start third again. My question to you, Umilius, is: do you feel that Sainz was right to start third again as the count back, or should he have started at the back? I know, obviously, when the red flag, just for context of anyone that's watching, the red flag was flown before Guan Yu Zhou had managed to get round the incident that caused the red flag with the two Hasses and the Red Bull, and before he'd got past Sainz, which is the rule. If Zhou had got past where Sainz had parked up,
You just answered the question
then
you're asking me, then, mate.
yeah, true. But no. But my theory is that fair on everybody else in that scenario? So but it was only very just. And obviously, Zhou then, obviously, it's just after the red flag, did pass Sainz's car before Sainz could get it back. So, should Sainz have really started maybe one step ahead of Zhou where it was on the track when the red flag was flown? Because in theory, that's where,
Well, I mean,
they've done a count back to the start.
we can start pointing out when rules are fair and when they're not fair till the cows come home. But at the end of the day, it's in the rule book. Show you the order of the way it starts. But that's not what the rules say. So theoretically, what's fairest is to go by the rules, and the rules say Carlos Sainz should be reinstated. So he was. This is one of those things to pin to anyone. So I don't think it's unfair.
I agree with you in the sense of they followed to the letter of the law, so that bit is fine. My more the question was more aimed at the law itself, and the ruling itself in any way, shape, or form. There is an
Moving
extenuating
unnecessarily
circumstance.
slowly or something as well.
Yeah, then technically Joe could have. So that's why I'm saying, as you enter the pits might be unfair, because it might mean that Sainz with a puncture is racing the last little bit to stay ahead of Joe, who's
Well,
trying to
yeah. I
overtake
mean,
him.
in that regards, then that rule should also be changed. That you can't
Yeah,
pass anyone, regardless of
yeah,
unless they're stationary or something. But
yeah.
I,
Well,
I think
my
there's many rules, as I said, that it's unfair.
yeah.
Again, look at this exact rule worked against Carlos Sainz in Australia the other year, didn't it? Where there was a red flag and everything got put back, and then he was screwed over, kind of thing. So because
Mm.
of the penalty he got. So you know these rules work for and against people all the time, and I think we can start nitpicking at things, but it's at the end of the day, it's one rule for everyone. If we start going, oh, well, it's unfair on Joe because he starts behind Sainz, even though technically he should have been ahead of him. Well, then in a few races' time, we'll be like, oh, it's unfair on Sargent because he should have started behind. It just becomes a bit of a farce at that point. Just stick to the rules. The rules are the rules, and none of this fucking 2021 bullshit again. Where they're making up the
No, it's
rules on the
definitely not to
fly.
that level. No, I don't think so. No, I think the rule could be quite simpler. In this occasion, when the red flag is flown, right? That's where you.
In place is, for example, on tracks that are more open and people are racing side by side when that red flag is flown.
No, more playing devil's advocate really of like he was parked on the side of the road down in second last when the red flag was flown. Is it fair on everybody else that he just wiggles his way back? My only the query on other people could have benefited, and especially McLaren, who would have got a 2-3, which would have been ideal, or even been able to attack Leclerc with like 2v1 and potentially have even manufactured a way past him at some point. So that was my only kind of query
I completely
that
understand
looking
why
at.
you're bringing it up. I mean, think back like 10, 15 years ago where they had third cars and Perez would have been able to start the race again.
Count back to the sector, which is fairer than the previous lap that they used to be, because obviously a lot can happen in half a lap in F1. So when it's not Monaco, but generally, yeah. So no, you make a very, very good.
As you get to
Somewhere
the
around.
the tunnel, it's down there somewhere. But,
Yeah,
they
something like
haven't
that.
reached the
But,
sector.
yeah,
I think it's every car has to have passed the sector as well. So
which
they wouldn't have. So, but yeah. Anyway, I think that's it. I think the general consensus is Monaco needs to do something to change to make racing more interesting, or the cars need to change, or something needs to change. Maybe do it in reverse. Who knows? Maybe that would work. It wouldn't work. Just FYI, it would not work because the barriers are not set up that way. But yeah, they need to do something because it is the most boring race of the year so far, and I am so glad to see the back of it. Any closing remarks that you want to make?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we could sit here and draw out maps around Monte Carlo of where we think the track should go to try and increase overtaking, but there's 1,000,001 of those already online. So feel free some of those options. There's some really sort of good ideas, and some that are just absolutely never going to work. So, and I don't think any of them are going to work without some sort of structural change to the actual streets of Monaco. Bearing in mind they've got sort of central reservations and things like that, which is part of the biggest issue. So, until the Prince of Monaco is prepared to change literally the face of his streets, is going to stay as it is, unfortunately. So, but no, really happy for Charles. That's a whole career's worth leading up to that point. So fantastic for him. Amazing for McLaren as a whole. Max having a bit of an off day, which is great on the Saturday, which screwed him over for Sunday. So that's great for the rest of us and makes it more competitive. You're looking at only 24 points, thanks to Perez not pulling up his end of the bargain. Only 24 points between Red Bull and Ferrari, and that's less than a single car's race win. So, this season, you could argue is back on, arguably. Because
in Canada where Max laps the whole grid.
Yeah, for now. But we can live in that little bit of bliss until then. So that's my closing remark.
Absolutely, yeah, fantastic. Well, we are off. We'll actually be back streaming at 7:30 tonight, live on Twitch. If you want to watch the IVE Racing League, we won't have Wibsy with us this week because he is on holiday. So sucks to be him because he's going to miss out on some points. But we will be racing at Japan, so come and watch as I inevitably crash out in turn 1. But bye for now, everybody. Thank you.